The Legend of Zelda, a video game series that has been iconic since the days of the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1986, and a series that has gone all the way from then to now being the genre-defining title that it was almost destined to be, with Tears of the Kingdom probably going to be that exact same thing on May 12th of next year. And The Legend of Zelda is a series that I have adored since I was 8 years old, playing A Link Between Worlds on my 3DS XL. And this series is well known for having some of the most iconic games of all time, but also having a lot of forgettable titles. So with that in mind, and also the fact that coming up we have a brand new Zelda game, I figured it would be kind of fun to look back at the entire series. And while I have adored this series for a long time, I haven't played through all the entries yet, so I figured it would also be fun to go through that. So, of course, let's start with where it all began, The Legend of Zelda, 1986. Now, if I wasn't a super big Zelda fan and I randomly picked up and played this game, I probably wouldn't like it very much. This is one of the most confusing games, I would say, of all time. I mean, trying to figure out where to go and what you're supposed to do in each section is not easy. And compared to the clever puzzles of the future, this game's puzzles basically consist of push this block, or bomb this wall, or set fire to this random bush, and hope for the best. Now, obviously, this gives a lot of extra playtime for the game, but that's not necessarily ideal, and that's not necessarily how I want playtime to be added. And a walkthrough nowadays is basically required for this game. Otherwise, you're going to be spending upwards of 40 to 50 hours just to get through each section. And honestly, by the end of it, around level 7 or so, I was starting to get tired of the game. I mean, the combat can be pretty difficult sometimes, and also considering where the puzzles are, it basically requires the walkthrough to be on site at all times, which again is kind of annoying. And for other Zelda games, this is not a requirement at all. In fact, its sequel doesn't really have much of puzzles, but rather just non-stop action. And while its sequel is much more difficult, I still find that The Legend of Zelda is, well, still hard. Now, of course, there are ways to be able to cheese the game, but I wasn't really going to take advantage of a lot of those, and some of those I just found out just by moving forward in certain places. But overall, I would say that, well, the puzzles are kind of funny to look at in a walkthrough. They're not actually ideal for a legitimate game. And also, this game is definitely outdated in that regard. Just finding random secrets just to move on to the next level isn't ideal. I mean, seriously, to get to Ganon's Tower in level 9 of the game, the final level, you have to bomb a random boulder in one specific spot in the mountains. And that's the final level of the game, something that you should be building up to since the beginning. And also, the boss fights are incredibly lame. These are some of the easiest boss fights from this era without a doubt. And the final boss fight also isn't incredibly difficult. This game wasn't super challenging in terms of the boss fights, but rather regular combat missions were kinda difficult sometimes, such as the Dark Knights, which basically you have to be in one specific location in order to kill them. And they take a lot of hits. Great. And do a lot of damage. Also great. But while I'm mostly narking on the game so far, maybe I should just slow down and talk about some good things. Like the music. The music of this game obviously is incredibly iconic, and that's not a surprise. I mean, the sequels make sure that this game is iconic, and some of the puzzles in this game are iconic. Some of the just ideas of this game are moved on for generations. But kind of a question I should leave you all with, because I don't really know the answer to, is The Legend of Zelda good because of its sequels, or is The Legend of Zelda good because it's actually fun to play through? Honestly, I don't really know the answer to that. And while I would say that this game is iconic, it being iconic doesn't automatically make it good. I mean, yeah, E.T. on Atari is iconic, but it's also iconic for being bad. And honestly, that's something that I think you should have the opinion of, not me. But when it comes to ranking this game, I would probably rank it as one of the lower Zelda games, because it really holds up not well at all compared to what comes in the future. And while it's not the worst game in the series, and I would argue it's better than its sequel, it's still not the best game in the series by far. But I will give it some props for basically creating the adventure game genre when it released on NES. The NES wasn't really known for having very many adventure games, it was mostly known for platformers. But this carved the way for future adventure games, which are now starting to become one of the biggest genres right now. And once again, Zelda is pioneering that leap with Breath of the Wild. And honestly, The Legend of Zelda, when it first came out, was definitely a pioneer title, like the titles after it. Which is why I can appreciate it for all of its worth. And also the fact that this released on the NES, and honestly, most NES games were kind of BS as well. And while I was mostly hating on this game for this review, that was also because I was starting to get sick of it by the end. But the music is iconic, the atmosphere I honestly kind of enjoyed, and while I hated the difficult combat, some of the easier combat I suppose was actually a ton of fun. And the amount of weapons you get to use is also really exciting. This pioneered the adventure genre, and I would feel bad if I didn't give it at least a decent score. But granted, giving it this score is also because of what else released on this console. If this released right now, I would probably give it like a 2 or 3. But for an NES game, I will give The Legend of Zelda a middle of the road 5 out of 10. It'll make sense later.